So today we're going to answer the skeptics on this passage here, Matthew 2:23, because they claim that it's quoting the Old Testament prophets and that there is no corresponding prophecy in the Old Testament for this. We're going to look at Matthew 2:15 and Matthew 3:3 also, which are very similarly structured references to Old Testament prophecies. And they're right there next to this in the text. So we're going to compare all three of these in the precise English edition of the rooted word, where we can see the structure from the Greek. Okay, so here you have it. It's resolving Matthew 2:23. So let's look first at Matthew 2:15. Now this might feel a little stilted to you, but it's because it's a precise translation from the Greek. So it's maintaining or retaining a lot of the Greek syntax, the order of the words from the Greek, and even some of the wording itself. Matthew 2:15. In order that it might be filled up what was lacking, that being uttered under the Lord through the prophets, laying forth, from out of Egypt I call my son. Now let's look at Matthew 2:23. In the manner that it might be filled up what was lacking, that being uttered through the prophets, because he will be called a Nazarene. And now Matthew 3:3, a few verses later. For the same one is existing, that being uttered under Isaiah the prophet, the one laying forth, a tone of one hailing in the lonesome place. You must adjust the way of the Lord, the way of Lord. You must be making straight the ruts of his tracks. All right. Now, it's actually good that this is not so familiar of text to you because it's more from the Greek. So you can see the structure and compare it more easily. So let's look at a couple of things here. Now let's just look at where it gets into right here. This is the phrase. You can see it's highlighted in yellow in the other two. So this is a common phrase. This is a special notepad type program called Kate, which is in Linux. I'm in Ubuntu Linux. And so when you highlight something, it shows all the other instances of it in your text. So it's very good for comparing scripture. When you put scripture up here, you can see where a certain word or phrase is repeated. And here we've got exactly the same phrase in all three of these verses. So that introduces the quote, that being uttered. It's that, like that one, that thing. It's not like the conjunction that. It's like that thing, okay? So that being uttered, then we get this. Under the Lord through the prophets, okay? And if you look at the other one after that being uttered, it says through the prophets only. Then here it says under Isaiah instead of under the Lord. Under Isaiah, the prophet. Okay? So you have three different approaches here. The first two are very similar, except that it has under the Lord before through the prophets. So it's very interesting. But what happens after that? It says under the Lord through the prophets, laying forth. This is what's the quote. It's introducing this is what was said. To lay forth is often translated as laying forth is often translated as saying. All right, but it's literally laying forth. So it's this is going to be a quote, is what it's saying. But down here you don't have that. Through the prophets, because he will be called a Nazarene. It's not introducing a quote from the prophets or any prophet or from the Lord. It's saying that something will be filled up that was lacking, which is being uttered through the prophets, but it doesn't say what or where in the prophets. But it says those will be filled up because he will be called a Nazarene. Some take that to mean that him being called a Nazarene is the prophecy. It doesn't say that. It absolutely doesn't say that. But down here you say that being uttered under Isaiah the prophet, the one laying forth, there it is again, the one saying, a tone of one hailing in the lonesome place. You must adjust the way of the Lord. You must be making straight the ruts of his tracks. So we see that Matthew 2:23 is not a quote from the prophets. It's not a reference to something in the prophets, except for something up here that says it might be filled up what was lacking. Okay? That being uttered through the prophets. So the thing being filled up that was lacking was uttered through the prophets. We don't know what that is. It doesn't say. But it says, because he will be called a Nazarene. So is that the reason why it was uttered through the prophets, or why he might be filling up what was lacking? This one, it might be filled up what was lacking, because he will be called a Nazarene. All right. So anyway, you see, that's not a problem. Those who say this is referring to something in the Old Testament that the prophets said, they're wrong. They're wrong. This is the cause for Jesus filling up what was lacking, that being uttered through the prophets. This is the reason why, him being called a Nazarene. But that's not the prophecy. That's not what's there. So I hope that resolves it for you, and you can go ahead and memorize this. You can give people a link to this video and have them look at it themselves. May the Lord bless you as you seek him with all your heart.